following truth, not what we've been told. Searching your word for what is written, what you spoke. Following truth, Jesus, lead us in your light. Following truth, every page comes alive tonight.
Hello and welcome to Following Truth. As always, I am your host, LJ. Today's study, we're going to be looking at a specific topic. We're going to be looking at the virgin birth, but it's going to be quite specific. I've done many videos on the virgin birth in the past, but we're going to be looking at specific arguments made by the Hebrew Israelites against the virgin birth. So before I get into that, just like to say thank you very much for being here. It's nice to see people coming to view my channel and obviously coming to hopefully learn something. Now, as always, if you disagree with something, that's okay. I'm only putting forward my studies, my understanding of this particular topic. And we're really just going to be concentrating on the arguments that are made by the Hebrew Israelites against the virgin birth. So we're not really going to spend a huge amount of time trying to dissect whether the virgin birth in Isaiah 7:14 is Alma and these types of Parthenos, or whether it's a virgin young woman, whether it's really a prophecy at all. We're just going to be focusing specifically on a couple of the arguments that the Hebrew Israelites actually present, and so that's what we're going to focus on in this particular study. So thank you for being here, and we'll just delve into it. Now at the end, if anybody would like to come up and discuss what is being stated here, what we've looked at, I'm more than happy to have a discussion at the end of this particular study. Obviously, it will have to be on that particular topic of the virgin birth. And really, I'd like to stay on topic in the sense of what is actually being presented in the argument that I present today. So if you could kind of stay on topic, that would be brilliant. Hopefully I am coming across and people can hear me, and that I am on both Rumble and on YouTube. So I know that Freddie is here. If you are here, Freddie, if you could let me know that you could hear me. I always like to just clarify at the beginning whether I'm actually coming across and actually people can hear. So it's always nice to know whether people can hear what you're actually saying. So right. I have in the past done presentations where awesome, Dennis is here. So I have done parts of presentations in the past where I was either on mute or for some reason I just wasn't being heard. So it's always good to know that you're being heard. Now, the reason why I'm doing this particular topic, this particular study, is that recently this was a topic that came up on another channel that I go to, Freddie's channel, as I pointed out prior in another video. Freddie has a live channel that I frequent, not every day, but quite regularly. I am there, and this was something that was brought up by a Hebrew Israelite on the channel, an argument against the virgin birth, which was a discussion which was happening on that live chat. So I just wanted to bring up some of the arguments that the Hebrew Israelites will use against the virgin birth, and just address some of those particular arguments. So I'm just going to go and delve straight into it. So if I could, I don't want to bring that. That's how I want it to be. There we go. So, okay. So the Hebrew Israelites' arguments against the virgin birth debunked is what we're going to be looking at. We're going to I'm going to focus on four particular topics, or four arguments that they present. So in Luke 3:23, there is the use of parentheses that they will argue is means that this is an addition to Luke 3:23. So we're going to delve in and just quickly look at Luke 3:23 and just show really quickly how that argument fails and doesn't hold up to the argument that they like to present. Then we're going to look at the prophecy given to King David, that it was through his bowels, and the prophecy does not change, and so that it has to be a physical offspring of King David. So we're going to look at that particular argument and show how the virgin birth does not contradict that at all. Then we're going to look at the word seed in the English and in the Hebrew, and then we're also going to look at a manuscript. It's the Syriac Sinaiticus manuscript. This is a manuscript that they like to use against the virgin birth, and we're going to look at that particular argument. And then we're also going to look at the Ebionite argument, that the Ebionites did not believe in the virgin birth. So we're going to delve into all of these. Hopefully just over an hour. It may be a little bit more, but hopefully somewhere around that kind of time. So I'm just going to go in and we're going to look at the use of parenthesis in Luke 3:23. Now, if you see this in Luke 3:23 in the King James Bible, it says, "And Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being," and the parentheses here are surrounding "as was supposed, the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli." Now, what the Hebrew Israelites will say, and they will argue, is that those words "as was supposed" in the parentheses are added words. They're not part of the original text. And so actually what it should read is, "And Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli." And that these words "as was supposed," they are not original to the Gospel of Luke. So we're going to look at that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up, so I want to bring up the, so I need to stop sharing that screen. I want to bring up Luke 3:23. So I need to present my screen, share screen, Luke 3:23. And then I need to, I think, there you go. So Luke 3:23. Now, if you notice here in the King James Bible, "as was supposed," hopefully you can see that screen. Let me make that as big as I possibly can on the screen. So I'll take myself off. "As was supposed" there is in the parenthesis in the King James Bible. Now, there are other versions that have it, the New King James. The ESV does have, as was supposed, in the parentheses there as well. But what you'll notice is that other versions do not have these parentheses, such as the NIV, the NLT, and then we can scroll down and you can see that not all versions, some do, the ASV does have it, but there are many versions here that don't have these parentheses. Now, when you go into the Greek here, right, what you'll notice that hos enemizito is in the Greek here, right? It's part of the text. And when we scroll down, this is part of the text. It isn't something that has been added. The Westcott and Hort text has it. The Nessel Allen 27 UBS 4. They're now on the 29th edition, but it's still there. This is Bible Hub. It just has the 27th edition there. But what you'll see is that this wording is part of the text, and it isn't missing from any of the versions. So what we know is that in some cases there is a discrepancy, or there's a difference in textual criticism between something like the Westcott and Hort text and the NA 27, 28, 29 editions, and then something like the Textus Receptus. There are differences sometimes, Byzantine text. What we will see is that there are differences in readings. That's not the case here. The reason why that these are in parenthesis is because what it is the translators are just adding these into parentheses, because what it is an addition by the author themselves. They are inputting a thought into the text that they're writing, and so they just add something that they're trying to explain into the text. So it doesn't mean that it's been added to the text by somebody later than the author. It just means that the author themselves has added a thought into the text. And some versions, they put the parentheses around to let you know that this is an author's thought, whereas others don't. Now, if I remove that, and what we can see is the parentheses versus and brackets, definition and examples. The parentheses are punctuation marks used to set aside tangential or unnecessary information. They're typically used for complementary explanations or personal commentary from the author, as well as for defining acronyms. So this is from a blog that you on the King James, and it's just explaining that I think the wording here, unnecessary information, is wrong. Is information that is required, or it's not necessity to the text, but it is into the commentary that the author is trying to put forward. And if we go to why did the King James Bible translator use italics in the King James? Actually, I don't want that. That's going to come in. That's going to come in a second when we look at the some of the words which are in italics. So this is going to. I shall come back to that in a second, actually. So yeah, what's important here is just to know that the parentheses there are they're not. It doesn't mean that there's any doubts over the authenticity of this part of the Greek. It just means that there is an addition being added by the author themselves. Now, all versions of the Bible prior to the King James in English, none of them had parentheses in the verse. Right, so it is a choice by the author, by the translators themselves. They're not trying to say that these words are doubted. What they're trying to do is that they're trying to show that that this is a thought, and it is an added thought by Luke. I want to the use of parentheses in the King James Bible. I don't actually have the. I'm going to bring this up because I would like to just show this. So again, I need to just. There's a lot of adding and sharing screens, which I'm going to be doing tonight, because one of the things that within that discussion is there were lots and lots of claims being made, and so within what I was asking in that discussion was for the receipts, and so we're going to look at the receipts today. This is something that Hebrew Israelites love to use, like the receipts. It just means show us the evidence. That's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at evidence tonight. I'm going to show you literal evidence. So let me go back to share a screen. Hopefully you can see this. So if I add that to stage there. The use of parenthesis in the King James Bible. Now, I could read all of this. Punctuation in your King James Bible remains a mystery to most. For one thing, in the earlier post on orthography, it was explained that rules of punctuation changed in the early 1700s, and that the work of Paris in 1762 and the Blayney in 1769 brought the punctuation of the King James Bible up to date with modern punctuation without changing any words or translations. The rule of parentheses does not appear to have changed from 1611 until now. A set of parentheses is used whenever the translators identified a thought within a thought. Wherever parentheses are employed in your Bible, it is possible to read the surrounding verse or verses without the words in parentheses and have it still make sense. But that doesn't mean that they're saying that they shouldn't be there. It just means that it is a thought going into the verse. Okay, so I just wanted to show that these parentheses are just part of the text, and they're not showing something that is not part of the text. So our next thing that we need to look at is the italics. Let me just show you this on the italics. So I need to stop. I'm going to be doing quite a bit of adding, sharing screens, and because, like I say, I want to show you the evidence. I don't want to just make the claims. I want you to see the actual evidence for it, for the things that I'm saying. Claims are good, and people can make claims, but do those claims hold water? Do they have anything behind them? Is there evidence for it? Now, when we do see the italics in the King James Bible, it's important to know why the italics are there. Why did the King James Bible translators use italics? Now, this is the King James Bible Research Council in the King James Bible. It was because God miraculously gave the translators, was it because God miraculously gave the translators additional inspiration the same way he did? It was recorded in 2 Peter 1:21. Holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost. Or is it, as some have assumed, that these words were printed in the fashion for emphasis? The answer to these questions is no. In fact, the words in italics in the King James Bible are words that were added by the translators to help the reader. This is usually necessary when translating from one language to another. Right. Because a word in one language may not have a corollary word in English, and an idiomatic expression often do not easily move from one language to another. Hence, the words in italics are words which do not have any equivalence in the Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek. By adding these words, the translator's goal was to make the meaning of the sentence clearer. Now, we're going to look at a couple of these examples of this. So really, the words are being added in the English to make English make sense in the translation, because there are things that are implied in Greek and in Hebrew that don't necessitate the specifics that the English language does. They are elliptical languages, which English is not. And so there are things implied within the text that we need added in the English in order to kind of make it clearer and for us to understand. Now, I'm going to show you just a couple of examples of this. So let's look at Matthew 1:19. So I'm going to have to remove that again, and I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go to Matthew 1. Where is it? There you go. Share it there. Okay, hopefully you can see that. We're going to go to Matthew 1:19. Hopefully, like I say, hopefully you can see that. So Matthew 1:19. So we're just going to show you now. I fully understand that there are many of you going to be in watching that are already aware of this. You already know what this means. You understand this. This is just really for those that may not really understand this. Now, if you see here in the King James Bible, it says, "Then Joseph, her husband, being a just man," but man is in the italics here. Man does not occur in the Greek here. So when we go to the Greek, it just says, Joseph, now the husband of her, righteous being, and not willing her to expose publicly. That doesn't make sense in English, right? So the word man is added in the English or otherwise it would just read, "Then Joseph, her husband, being a just." That doesn't make sense in English, but it does in the Greek because of the way that the construct of the feminine and masculine wording in the Greek. We don't have that really in English. So the word man really needs to be added there in order to make that sentence make sense. It's not there in the Greek, but in English it is. Now, the King James adds it in an italics to let you know that it's there. Now, others have changed the meaning or the translation. So then Joseph, her husband, being righteous, it could be a way of translating it. But if you see something like the ESV, being a just man. Now, that man is not in italics in the ESV. So you wouldn't know that it was added in the ESV. You would have to go to the Greek in order to be able to understand that. So just wanted to kind of point that out, that when you see italics, it doesn't mean that the translators are trying to add words into the text. Now, one verse, actually, Deuteronomy 28:68. This is a verse that the Hebrew Israelites absolutely love, because they on another topic, the Deuteronomy 28:68 is a verse that they like to use as proof that they are the true Israelites. Deuteronomy 28 is something that they use on a regular basis. But if you look here, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Now, this is a verse that they use to show that they were taken into captivity on ships. Okay, because if you know the Hebrew Israelites, you'll know that their kind of argumentation regarding them being brought in the transatlantic slave trade from Africa, and that's how they go into slavery on ships. Now, by the way thereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Right? The Hebrew doesn't have you there. The English does, because no man shall buy you doesn't. If you just have in English, no man shall buy, it doesn't give you what they won't buy. So you need the English word there, you, in order to clarify what no man shall buy. And if you have a look here in other versions, you will see that other versions do not include, they have you, but they don't have the italics. So it kind of, you don't know that word is not there, but it's not in the Hebrew. But this is even added to one of their favorite verses, this italic. So you need the italics there. So that was just something that that was just another part of something I wanted to show. Now, like I say, not all versions of the Bible will put those italics in. Those words back in Luke, the Luke 3:23, those are not in italics, right? Those are in parentheses. So it's not additional words, and there's no textual variant there to say. So it's not the Bible, the translators adding those words in, and it's not in a textual variant to say that these were added at a later date. They are a part of the original text. It is only the parentheses that have been added. So now this, should I bring this up? Yeah, let me bring up Acts 14:19, because that same word is used in Acts 14:19. This is in regards to Paul. So hopefully you can still see that. I don't think I can make that any bigger. But Acts 14:19, and it says, and there came there certain Jews. Now certain is in the italics, Jews from Antioch and Iconium, who persuaded the people, and having stoned Paul, drew. Now again, him is not in the original, but drew what out of the city? Of course, it was Paul. So him in the English is required there. Supposing he had been dead. This is a presumption. This is something that it is a thought. They thought that Paul was dead, but he wasn't. So this supposed, back in Luke when it said that being the supposed father of Joseph does not necessitate that it was true. The supposed son of Jesus. I've got that. Being the supposed son of Joseph, Jesus being the supposed son. The supposed there does not mean that it was true. It means that they thought. That's what people were thinking. Paul wasn't actually dead. They supposed that he was dead. And this is the exact same Greek word that is used in Acts 14:19 as used in Luke 3:23. So it is just a thought. It is something that people thought. But it doesn't mean that it was true. So just because Luke says the supposed father of Joseph does not mean that he's saying, the supposed father of Jesus, he is not saying that Joseph was the father. This is something that people presumed. They assumed that he was. So let's go and go a bit further into this. It is also used in Luke 2:44. I won't bring this up, but this was used when they back in Luke 2:44, where Mary and Joseph and Jesus were at the temple and they left, and they supposed that Jesus was with them, but he wasn't. They presumed that he was. So this is the exact same word that you'll see there as well. So if anybody wants to actually go and look at these the parentheses, if they want to look at that word presumed, what it actually means, it doesn't mean that it's added. It's a thought. Now, so this is a really important prophecy, and an important part of the argument that the Hebrew Israelites will present. The prophecy given to King David was through his bowels, and the prophecy does not change. Now, this doesn't. This is old way of speaking. It's basically meaning that the seed of David, the physical seed of David, this is how the lineage would come through, and it would be through David. It had to be a physical descendant of King David, and I certainly do not disagree with that. What they go further than what the prophecy is that this had to be a physical lineage of David, but then they say that it has to come through the male seed all the way through to the Messiah. That's wrong. The prophecy was only given to King David. The King David, it had to be from his direct lineage. Now, let's say that I have a son and I have a daughter. Both of those are my lineage. Those are both direct descendants of me. Now, if my son has a child, that is further direct descendancy from me. It is through me to my son to what would be my grandson. But that is a direct lineage back to me. But the same is if I have a daughter. If my daughter has a child, regardless of whether that's a boy or a girl, that is still my direct descendant, because it comes from me through my daughter, and she is part of that, the production of that child. So that would still be my direct grandson or granddaughter. So the lineage only shows that the prophecy has to be that the lineage is of King David. It couldn't be from anybody else. It had to be of King David. But that there is no necessity that once the lineage passes from King David to his children, that lineage then has to be from the male. There is an argument about about the king side of it, whether it had to be male or female. That's not what we're going to be arguing for. That's not the argument that the Hebrew Israelites are presenting. The Hebrew Israelites will argue that the prophecy is a physical prophecy in 2 Samuel 7:12. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. Now, like I say, it has to be a direct lineage to King David. That's all that prophecy is. It's not saying whether it would be from the male or the female. It's just saying that they have to have a direct lineage back to King David. Now, if Mary is of David, then she has a direct lineage back to King David. So even though it would pass on through the woman, the lineage would still go all the way back to King David, if Mary is of King David. And I've shown elsewhere in 2 Chronicles where the lineage of the king does pass through a woman. So we're not going to worry about that, because that's not the particular argument that we're dealing with at the moment anyway. We're just dealing with this. It has to be the seed. And they will argue that this means a physical sperm of the male. But that's only in relation to King David. But they want to pass this on from generation to generation, that it has to be of the male that is producing this. Now, yes, we understand that men are the ones that produce the sperm, but that does not negate the fact that women can still be of that lineage, and they are still of the lineage of their fathers. So what we're going to look at specifically is what we should do first is actually just look at the prophecy, because what we get to in David is kind of is almost the end of a prophecy, right? It's the end of that prophecy that goes from, I believe that Genesis 3:15 is the first prophecy. Now that goes to Eve, and really it's a kind of a promise against against Satan as well, against the serpent in there, that the seed of the woman. Now, this is going to become a bit of problematic to the Hebrew Israelites, because seed there is going to be the same word as used in 2 Samuel. So if we're talking about sperm in that sense, then they're going to get a problem with Genesis 3:15 that talks about the seed of the woman. And there are other places where the seed of the woman comes into play, and we'll have a look at that. So what happens is that we see the prophecy comes, basically, the Messiah has to be human. It has to come through Eve, and it has to be just a human being. Now, as time goes on, what we see is that this prophecy gets narrowed down, and it comes it can only be through the lineage of Seth. So it has to go back to Adam and Eve, but through the line of Seth. Then it gets narrowed down after the flood. So now we're only dealing with Noah, and then we're only dealing with Shem. And then as we go down further on, we are only dealing with Abraham. And so that lineage of Abraham then gets narrowed down again when it passes on to Isaac. And it's only Isaac that is part of that lineage, the messianic lineage that passes down. Then from Isaac, we obviously get Jacob. But these are not the only children of these people. Abraham had many children. He had obviously Ishmael, but then he also had other children with Keturah later on in life. But that then goes Isaac to Jacob, and then eventually, so it could be any of the tribes of Israel. But then it gets narrowed down again, where it can only come through the tribe of Judah. So anybody from the tribe of Judah would have been possible. It would have been possible for them to be the Messiah. But then it gets narrowed down even further and becomes only through the line of David. And that's what this prophecy is. But so what we see is this lineage that comes, and it is passed down, and it is narrowed down from kind of basically could be any human being down to it has to have this particular lineage in order to qualify as the Messiah. Now, like I say, that doesn't necessitate that after King David that the lineage has to be from male to male. It just means that they have to have a direct lineage back to King David in whatever way that might be. So, like I say, if Mary has a lineage back to King David, then she is from David, which would also make Jesus, without the if he doesn't have the biological father, that would still make him of David, because we've seen in Second Chronicles where in other videos we've seen in Second Chronicles where the lineage does pass through a woman and can pass through a woman in certain cases when a man does not have any male offspring. So you could go to Genesis 12:7, where the promise to Abraham is that it's going to go through his seed. This is also repeated in Genesis 17:7. But then we also see that Abraham has Ishmael with Hagar, but that isn't counted as the seed. That doesn't count. Although he does have that child, it's not part of that seed. And then, like I say, in Genesis 25, we see that Abraham has even more children with Keturah. Isaac had other children, obviously Esau and Jacob, but only Jacob was the one that was counted as that seed. Now, the seed is the important word here. So if I had to stage that, this is Genesis 12:17, so you can have a quick look at those. But the word seed in the Bible, so that's what we need to look at next. Just quickly have a look at that word seed. So now if I bring this back up, this there, and we go into 2 Samuel again, and we go to, we want to go to 2 Samuel 12 and 7. Oh no, it's not 12:7, it's 7:12, isn't it? What am I doing? Right. So this word is Zara, your seed. Zara. Descendants, seed, offspring. This is how it's used there. Now, it can mean seminal in a certain sense, and we'll look at that. But what it really just means is descendants, offspring. Now, if you have a look at the other translations of this, I will raise up your offspring. Now, it doesn't mean that I will raise up your sperm to succeed you. That makes no sense whatsoever. So, of course, it can't be talking about physical sperm here. This is talking about descendants. The word Zara here is talking about your offspring, your descendants, those people, not sperm that will come from your bowels. That's what that produces. When it mixes with the female, it becomes a child and it becomes seed, but that means descendant in the context of 2 Samuel. So we're not using this Zara as what they would like to make argue for. Let me now go down. Now, do I have Psalm 132:11? Now, notice in Psalm 132:11, this body is going to be in a female construct. This it's 11, isn't it? 132:11. Right. The Lord has sworn in truth unto David, he will not turn from it. The fruit of thy body will I set upon thy throne. Now notice that word there, the fruit of your body, is in your body, is in the feminine singular construct. Okay. This is a clue to the actual how the virgin birth will actually come about. So this word here, your body, is in a feminine singular construct. Now, what I want to do is go into now this word. So I want to go to Romans 1:3 because I want to show in the Greek as well. So when we go to Romans 1:3, because this is they get hung up on this word spermatos in the Greek, right? this seed, spermatos. Now they think that because it says spermatos, that it means a man's sperm, the seed spermatos. That's not what spermatos means, right? The English word sperm does come from the Greek and Latin. Does refer to that, but it doesn't in the Greek, right? It means a seed. It means, but it also means children or descendants. So in Romans 1:3, where it talks about Jesus being of the seed of David. Now they get hung up on in the King James because it says seed of David, right? So it means that he's the sperm of David. Well, that makes no sense, because if we're talking about physical lineage, then Jesus isn't the biological son of David. He is a descendant of David. And that's why you see that he was born into the King David's family line, or the descendant of David. He was a descendant of David according to the flesh. The seed of David according to the flesh. What its meaning here is that Jesus is related back and has a lineage back to King David. Doesn't mean that he's the sperm of David, and it doesn't mean that the physical sperm of David is what produced Jesus. It just means that he has a lineage back to King David. Now, it can be used as grains as well, that word. It doesn't mean like semen, as they want to kind of make that argument from. Now, you could go to things like Genesis 17:9, and God said unto Abraham, thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore thou and thy seed after thee. Doesn't mean sperm, it means your offspring after thee in the generations, right? Or it could be in Genesis 17:10, this is my covenant with you and your descendants after you. And what I'm going to just show you, Genesis 38:9, where this is Onan. Now, I'm sure people will recognize the story of Onan, where he was meant to consecrate a Levitical marriage. Hopefully you can all still see this. Yeah, hopefully. This is Onan that was meant to, because his brother died without a son, or without an heir. Onan, his brother, was meant to produce seed for him, an offspring, right? And Onan was actually punished because he didn't do this. So a lot of people are aware of this story, but this was a Levirate marriage, basically, where Onan was meant to produce an heir for his dead brother. And what we see is in the King James, and it says, Onan knew that the seed should not be his. And it came to pass, when he went unto his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. So should he give sperm to his brother, or should he give offspring, as other versions have it? So, like, we could go to the NIV, but Onan knew that the child would not be his, so whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground. Right. To keep from providing offspring. Now, this is where what is important. When we go and have a look at that Hebrew there, right? This that he emitted on the ground, and what word is it? I'm not sure in the Hebrew. It's this, I think it's this one. No, it's the Asherah. This, it means to destroy, corrupt, ruin, spoil. All right, this is the word that is translated as semen there in some versions, right? On the earth, on the ground, eretz, right? That emission was this word. An heir or seed is zerah. There are two different words here being used, right? This is zerah again, 2233. You see it here, zerah. So when it says that the child would not be his heir, it came to pass he admitted onto the ground, right? But the seed is not that he spilled on the ground is not zerah, is not spermatos, is not his male seed being spilled on the ground is not zerah. The word that they want to use is to say that the seed of the man must be from David. No, it's referring to the offspring. That's what we're using here. The offspring of the Onan. He didn't. Let me go back and just show you this in the verse again. All right, you'll see the difference. And let me go to the King James. They love the I love the King James, but that's the version that they use. So, and Onan knew that his seed should not be his. So is he saying that his sperm should not be his? No, what he's saying is that the seed, the offspring, that the child, he was not willing to have a child, right? The heir would not be his. That's zerah. The offspring would not be his. The child would not be his. So whenever he slept with his brother's wife, or when he went into his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground. He spilled his seed, but on the ground. But that seed there, we translated as seed there, is not zerah. That's the other word that we looked at, and would not produce offspring. Now that offspring there, the second usage is zerah. So when the Bible is referring to sperm, the human sperm, it is not using zerah. The Hebrew does not use zerah. It uses it as offspring. Now, what I would like to do is show you that there are a couple of times when even the King James does. Let me show you. Leviticus 15:16. There are a couple of times. Now, it's all in context, so I'll show you what is going on here. Okay, and if any man's seed of copulation go out from him, then he shall wash all his flesh in the water and be unclean until the even. Now, there are times when the King James does use the word semen, but it is not using zerah. It is using yatzah. it is using a different word. And also, if you notice, there is the added extra. This other versions actually, if a man has an emission of semen, right? So that's what is being referred to in here. But the seed of copulation, right? So there's the added piece of information there. Now that appears in the Hebrew, has an emission from copulation of semen. All right. Now the zara is being used here in the context of the copulation. That's the important part here, is that while zara is used as semen in Leviticus 15:16, 15:17, 15:18, Leviticus 15:32, Leviticus 22:4. All right, this is when you'll see that word, but it has this word prior to it, this going forth, or to come forth from copulation of semen, of zara, right? So it requires this. So if you have 15:17, and any garment and any leather on which there is of copulation semen, right? It is clarified that there is an emission, and you'll see it there as well, of semen. So it is always in with this this omission, or the lying down, right? It is never sing on its own. It is always clarified. So what I'm just trying to show you there is that there are times when even the King James Bible does translate this as semen, but it is in a context of, if I can go back and just show you this, it is always in the context of a seed of copulation, right? It is not just seed. It is a seed of copulation. When it is referring to an offspring, it is just zara. And so that is the difference, where you see zara and you see zara being used as in sperm. It's not being used in that sense. And what we know for a fact is not talking about offspring in this context. So the context of Leviticus here 15 is not talking about the descendant of David or a descendant of the person. It is talking about something completely different. So the context demands that zara is or isn't being used in that particular sense, and it has to be clarified. And when it is talking about offspring, the zara is just used on its own, and the context demands that it is talking about offspring. Now, what do I want to go to now? So I just wanted to show that the word spermatos, I could show that in Genesis 3:15, but you can have a look in the Greek there. Spermatos is used in Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman, and you can also see Rebecca in Genesis 24:60. The spermatos there, or the seed, is used in Genesis 24:60 of Rebecca's seed as well. And it's also used for Hagar as well in Genesis 16:10, where it says, "And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly." So obviously that's not referring to her sperm, that's referring to her offspring, the things that she's going to produce. It's the offspring of the woman. So I'm going to bring up 1 John 3:9 because this one is, I think this one is quite an important verse. 1 John 3:9. In the argumentation that they like to present regarding spermatos, whoever is born of God doth not commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him, and he cannot sin because he is born of God. Now, other versions of the Bible actually translate this as God's seed abides in him, for God's seed abides in him. Right? So, are we saying that God has sperm because God's seed remains in them? Right? This is a Greek word here, spermatos. Right? Spermatos. So does God have, is this verse saying that God has sperm? No, that's not what is being referred to there. So spermatos, sperma, does not necessitate that we are talking about human sperm. It does not necessitate this at all. Now, I'm going to quickly go to the Syriac Sinaiticus, because I still have, actually, we still haven't even touched on the Ebionites yet. But I want to bring up the Syriac Sinaiticus. Now, the reason why I'm going to bring up the Syriac Sinaiticus is because in Syriac Sinaiticus, it actually says that Joseph begat Jesus, and they love this manuscript. So if I could bring up, they absolutely love this manuscript. Where are we going? I don't want that. I want to bring up the manuscript, but don't seem to be able to add that to screen. Oh, there we go. Share that. So in this manuscript, now I'm going to have to really scroll into this, the translation of this. It says, Mathan begat Jacob, Jacob begat Joseph, Joseph, to whom was betrothed Mary the Virgin, begat Jesus, who is called the Christ. So it does say in this verse, in this manuscript, which is a one-off manuscript, we don't have any other manuscript that reads this, but it does say that Joseph begat Jesus. And like I say, this is a manuscript that they actually absolutely love. They use as kind of evidence and proof that that Joseph begat Jesus. Now, there is an issue with that, is because when you go to, they like to argue that Mary was a Levite. Problem with that is that when we go to Luke, and let me scroll out a little bit because I want to get to Luke. I think it's in Luke 2:4. So we want to get to Luke 2:4. The problem here is that when they want to use this manuscript, it goes against them. So it says there, these little dots here, these mean that there's a break in the manuscripts, and so we can't actually tell what was written. But in Luke 4, it says, also from went blank, that he might be enrolled there. And Joseph also, missing Joseph, from Nazareth, a city of Galilee, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem. He and Mary, his wife, being great with child, that they might that there they might be enrolled, because they were both of the house of David. So they want to use the manuscript as to prove that Joseph begat, but then they also argue that Mary is of the house of Levi. But the manuscript that they want to use actually says that both Mary and Mary and Joseph were of the house of David. So this is where the selective manuscript evidence comes in, because they want to use this, but then it disproves that them in this verse. It disproves their argument. Now this manuscript, and obviously this is a translation of it. This was found in 1892, and it dates to around about the 4th or 5th century. So it is the oldest manuscript that we have in Syriac. But what is interesting about this manuscript as well is that it is a palimpsest manuscript, meaning that the original text has been wiped away. It is been written over by another text, and so whoever used this manuscript just didn't feel like the text, the biblical text, was worth keeping, and they actually went over this with something else. Now, what's also interesting is that although it says that Mary was, or Joseph begat Jesus, when we go to it again, so obviously we've got that begat there, Jesus, Joseph begat. But then when we go to the next this in verse 18, it says, and the birth of Christ was on this wise: when Mary his mother was espoused to Joseph, when they had not come near one to the other, she was found with child of the Holy Ghost. All right. So we do get like some kind of contradiction in the manuscript itself. As I say, that reading in Matthew 1:16 is a unique reading. It is the only manuscript in existence that actually says that. No other manuscript actually says that Joseph begat Mary. Joseph begat Jesus. Right, but we do see that we have a contradiction in this particular manuscript. So now we have lots of writings from other historians, other Syriac writers that say that Mary was a virgin. So actually, if I'm going to bring that up, because like I say, I'm going to give you the receipts. And let me I want to bring up some Syriac writers just to show you that there are Syriac writers that actually do believe that Mary was a virgin. So we have Ephraim, a Syrian writer in the 4th century, in some of his works. Now I'm going to just search for virgin. There you go. For the virgin this day brought forth Emmanuel to Bethlehem. The virgin earth, that's not talking about that. The virgin bare today the Adam that was head over heavens. The virgin womb had a child who was born. And we see elsewhere from the virgin's womb. So these Syriac writers are saying something different than that one manuscript that we see. So I needed to bring up the receipts for that. And there are many times when actually he does that, and there are other writers that do it. So now we've looked at kind of that manuscript, and Aphrahat as well. For if we call Christ the Son of God, David taught us this, that we call him God. Now, I'm not making that argument, but Aphrahat, that we learned from Isaiah, and his government was laid upon shoulder, for he bare his cross and went out from Jerusalem, and he was born as a child. Isaiah said again, lo, the virgin shall conceive and bear, and his name shall be called Emmanuel, which is our God with us. So Aphrahat also acknowledges and attests to the virgin birth. But I want to also now address the Ebionites and the virgin birth, which is, like I say, another kind of thing that they love to use, is the Ebionites, as if the Ebionites prove what they want to prove. So I'm going to look into this in a little bit of detail, although I have been going for an hour and 17 minutes. I'm going to try to keep this in the next 15 minutes, just to keep it certainly under 2 hours anyway, but I'll try an hour and a half if I can. So what we need to look at is the Ebionites and the virgin birth. So this is, if you look at certain arguments, certain places on the web, you'll see the Ebionites did not believe in the virgin birth of the Messiah. They believed that Yeshua was a real flesh and blood human being like the rest of us, born as the eldest son of the sexual union of his parents Joseph and Mary. Now look at that writing, as if the virgin birth, the implication of that means that if Jesus was born of a virgin, he wouldn't be a real flesh and blood human being. That's the kind of implication, the argument that is being made on this particular website. The Ebionites accepted the original Hebrew. They also say on this same website, the Ebionites accepted original Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. The Ebionites accepted the original Hebrew version of the Gospel of Matthew without the first 2 chapters as their sole New Testament scripture, with the possibility of several other books, such as their own Gospel of the Ebionites. Now, this is what we're going to see is this is claim. There's no evidence for this, in the sense of what is being stated about, the Gospel of the Ebionites, and without the first 2 chapters, that they didn't have this. We're gonna show this as pure conjecture. Now, this is also from that same website. It says, the Gospels of Mark and John say absolutely nothing about the virgin birth of the Messiah, and throughout assume Yeshua to have been of normal human birth. No, that's not true. That yes, Mark and John do not say anything about the virgin birth, but they do not assume or presume or assert that Jesus was born of a normal birth. That's not what is said in either of those Gospels. But it then goes on, it is only in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke that the pagan fable of the virgin birth is introduced, and only in the first two chapters of these Gospels. The evidence is overwhelming that the first two chapters of Matthew and Luke are later additions by pagan Greek priests who grafted the virgin birth and Son of God myths into the simple original records of the human-born Messiah who descended from his ancestor David. Well, what is the overwhelming evidence that the first two chapters of Matthew and Luke are later additions? I'd love to see this evidence that says that these two chapters are additions. There is no evidence. We don't have manuscripts that don't contain these that start at chapter 3. There is just no manuscript in existence that has a start point of chapter 3. And now I could use many other websites. Let me go back to kind of make this argument, but I won't. I'm going to focus on this one. When it comes to the beliefs and the teachings of the Ebionites, in reality, we actually don't know a huge amount about the Ebionites at all. None of their own writings are in existence today, right? And what is known about them comes from those that wrote against them. The main details concerning the Ebionites actually just really come from Epiphanius. There are some writings in Irenaeus and a couple of others, but really Epiphanius is the one where we see the vast majority of this. Origen and Jerome we see a little bit, but it is mainly Epiphanius that we find this information. Now, one of the arguments could be is that, you know, this is only coming from their those that oppose them. Now, that isn't really an argument at all, because I am opposing the beliefs and the teachings of the Hebrew Israelites. I'm telling you that the Hebrew Israelites don't believe in the virgin birth. It's not the Hebrew Israelites that are saying that here. It's me. But am I wrong in my statement of what the Hebrew Israelites believe? Well, no, I'm not. I'm accurately depicting that the Hebrew Israelites reject the virgin birth. So just because it's coming from one of their opponents does not mean that the information is false. It just means that it's not them that is giving the information. Now, the thing is that we don't have any counter evidence that would say that the Ebionites didn't, or that they did believe in something else, right? All we have is the writings of the opponents. So if you want to say the opponents are wrong, that's fine, but you don't have any counter evidence. There is no writings of the Ebionites in order to counter the claims that are made against them. All we have are the writings of those that oppose them. So you would have to show and prove that they are wrong, but just because it's from the opponents does not necessitate at all that what they are saying is false. Now, there are claims, and you can actually find this online, that there are fragments of the lost gospel of the Ebionites. There is no evidence for this. There is no manuscript. This was used the other day in the discussion that I had with a Hebrew Israelite, that there are fragments of the lost gospel of the Ebionites that we have that show counter to what the opposition was saying. I asked for those manuscripts. Can you show me the manuscripts that say what you're claiming that they said? No manuscript was produced. No evidence was produced. They did not tell me to go to this place and you will be able to find the manuscripts. There are no manuscripts from the gospel of the Ebionites. Certainly not any authentic or real manuscripts. Somebody may have made some of these up at some point, but we don't have. There are no manuscripts of this gospel of the Ebionites. So we don't have this. Where are they? What do they say? What date are they from? Where can we find them? Right? When were they found? There's just no evidence for any of this. They don't exist outside the claims that they exist. Now, before we examine the claims, the further claims, let's find out a little bit about Ebion and who the Ebionites were. And like I say, the only way that we really know this is because of the writings of their opponents. So we would have to go to somebody like Epiphanius. Now, he says of Ebion that he was of the Nazarenes school, but preached and taught other things than they. So Ebion comes from the Nazarenes, right? But he taught slightly different than them. And he says further on, and as far as I know, he first lived in a village called Kakob in the district of Carnium, also called Ashtaroth in Bashantius. There he began his evil teaching, the place, if you please, where the Nazarenes I have spoken of come from. So Ebion comes from the Nazarenes, and that's really important when we look into this. For since Ebion was connected with them, and they with him, each party shared its own wickedness with the other. Each also differed from the other to some context, or to some extent, but they emulated each other in malice. Now, this is the writings of Epiphanius, but this is again. This is also Epiphanius. He wasn't a fan of the Ebionites at all, and he said that Ebion took all of his bad and disgusting doctrines of others, and he followed from the other sects, and that he followed them. I'm not going to read all of this out because, but he has Samaritan unpleasantness, but the Jews' name, the opinion of the Ossians, the Nazarenes, right? So, and Cerinthians, which will become important in a bit as well. Like I say, he says that he was a Samaritan there in point 5. For although he is a Samaritan, he rejects the name. So this is the writings that we have of now James Tabor. Now, if anybody knows James Tabor, he is a well-known, well-respected scholar, and he says that the associated with terms Nazarenes is second Hebrew designation, namely the Ebionites. So what we see is that that was also apparently used for the earliest, most mostly Jewish followers of Jesus, right? The Nazarenes, the Ebionites, they're linked together. What we see is that we have a linkage between the Nazarenes and the Ebionites, which is going to come into play. According to Jerome, the Nazarenes accepted the virgin birth. I was going to bring up Jerome, actually. I won't. Let me just read you Jerome. In Jerome's epistle 70 to Augustine, so you could go and read this online. If you Jerome's epistle 70 to Augustine, he says, "What shall I say of the Ebionites who pretend to be Christians? Today there still exists among the Jews in all the synagogues of the East a heresy which is called that of the Minians, and which is still condemned by the Pharisees. Its followers are ordinarily called Nazarenes. They believe that Christ, the Son of God, was born of the Virgin Mary." So the Nazarenes believed in the virgin birth and hold him to be one of the one who suffered under Pontius Pilate, and ascended to heaven, and in whom we also believe. But while they pretend to be both Jews and Christians, they are neither. So the Nazarenes, according to Jerome, did believe in the virgin birth. The Nazarenes, as I say, are linked to the Ebionites, and the Nazarenes belief. You can again. I'm gonna bring this up because I want to give you the receipts. So I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm gonna bring up this is, you can go and look online, the Nazarenes, the sect of the Nazarenes, right? Some of the beliefs that they have, right? And it very clearly says there. So the Nazarene beliefs, they believe that the Messiah was born of the Virgin Mary. And actually, Jerome letter 75 to Augustine actually says this as well. So this is basic. You can find this on Wikipedia. This is a Wikipedia page. So it's not something that you need to even search for. The Nazarenes believed in the virgin birth. They believed in the Virgin Mary. So let's go a little bit more. Now, the Nazarenes are actually mentioned in the book of Acts. And so let me add again this page. Let me just show you the Nazarenes in the book of Acts. And Paul was the leader of the Nazarenes. Acts 24:5. So if I go to Acts 24:5. Now let's read this there. And it says, "For we have found this man a persistent fellow, and a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes." And Nazarenes is, the Nazarene sect is all here. So the Nazarenes believed in the virgin birth. Paul was the leader of the Nazarenes. So to say that Paul didn't believe in the virgin birth would be to deny that he was a Nazarene, or to deny that the Nazarenes believed in the virgin birth. Now, Paul actually argues against that he was a troublemaker. The claim that he was a troublemaker. Where do we? but he actually acknowledges, it's in verse 12 and 13, he actually acknowledges that he is the one of the he is that ringleader. He is that of that sect. And he says, and they neither found me in the temple disputing with any man, neither raising up the people, neither in the synagogues nor the city. Now that was the claim that they were making, that he was this ringleader. But he then goes on, so he's denying that he's raising up a disturbance, but then he goes on that they cannot prove the things that they accuse him of. But then he says, but this I confess unto thee, after the way which they call heresy, so worship I the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and the prophets. So Paul actually acknowledges that he was following the way that they had said back in the accusation. He wasn't, he denied that he was causing a commotion and bringing this a bit of distress and commotion about, but he doesn't deny that he was of that way that they called heresy. And that is when we go back there, when it says the troublemaker stirring up among them of the world, he is the ringleader of the Nazarene sect. That sect there is heresy. That's what it means, the heresy, that sect, that faction, which is the exact same. So they accused him of being of the Nazarene heresy, and Paul acknowledges that he is of that heresy there. I am according to that way that they call heresy. So Paul acknowledges that he was a Nazarene, and the Nazarenes, as we saw, believed in the virgin birth. Now, the Ebionites did reject the virgin birth. Let me add this. So Epiphanius in book 1, that's not the correct section that I wanted, but in his book 1 he says, for this Ebion was contemporary with the Jews, and since he was with them, he was derived with them in the place that Christ was conceived of sexual intercourse and the seed of a man, Joseph. That's Epiphanius Panarion book 1. Origen claimed that there were differences between the Ebionites, just like Christians. And he argued in Origen Contro Celsum, book 5, chapter 61. He says, and these are the twofold sect of the Ebionites, who either acknowledge with us that Jesus was born of a virgin, or deny this and maintain that he was begotten like other human beings. So Origen actually says that the Ebionites, there were two different beliefs even in the Ebionites. One part believed in the virgin birth and one didn't. And that's Origen Contro Celsum, book 5, chapter 61. Eusebius also says that there were some Ebionites who accepted the virgin birth. And if you go to Eusebius Church History, book 3, number 1, it says where does it say? In book 3, chapter 3, I think. Where does it say that? Oh yeah, in number 2. For they considered him a plain and common man who was justified only because of his superior virtue. And he was the fruit of the intercourse of a man with Mary. In the opinion, the observance of the ceremonial law was altogether necessary on the ground that they could not be saved by Christ, by faith in Christ alone. I'm sure they also said that that some did accept the virgin birth. Go and read Eusebius Church History, Book 3. It is possible that the Ebionites who accepted the virgin birth were actually Nazarenes instead. That they weren't really Ebionites. That they were Nazarenes. It is possible. Epiphanius talks about this in that the Panarian book 1. Now, the Ebionites only used the Gospel of Matthew. Irenaeus was the first person to write against the Ebionites. Irenaeus stated that the Ebionites only used the Gospel of Matthew and that they had similar views to Cerinthus. And this is Irenaeus Against Heresies, Book 1. I will bring that up. I will bring up Irenaeus. Let me remove this because I want to bring up Irenaeus. Oh, I've removed my slides now. That wasn't what I wanted to do. But I do want to bring up what Irenaeus says in Against Heresies, Book 1, Chapter 26, because I think it's really important what Irenaeus says. He says, those who are called Ebionites, now, Chapter 26, Part 2, those who are called Ebionites agree that the world was made by God, but their opinions with respect to the Lord are similar to those of Cerinthus and Carpocrates. They use the gospel according to Matthew only and repudiate the Apostle Paul. So they don't accept Paul, maintaining that he was an apostate from the law. As to the prophetical writings, they endeavor to expound them in a somewhat singular manner. They practice circumcision, persevere in the observance of those customs which are adjoined by the law, and are so Judaic in the style of life that they even adore Jerusalem as if it were the house of God. So what he's saying is that they only use the Gospel of Matthew, but that they also reject Paul as well. And that's repeated by Epiphanius as well. He says, they too accept the gospel according to Matthew, like Cerinthians and Marinthians. They too use it alone. They call it according to the Hebrews. And it is true to say that only Matthew expounded and preached the gospel in the Hebrew language and alphabet in the New Testament. Now, both Irenaeus and Epiphanius mention that the Ebionites only used the Gospel of Matthew like Cerinthus or the Cerinthians. And that's going to come into play in a moment. So we do know by our sources that the Ebionites did only use the Gospel of Matthew. But that is problematic. We have 3 other Gospels. If you're going to use the Ebionites as evidence against the virgin birth, then you're also going to have to acknowledge that they didn't accept the Gospels of Mark, Luke, and John as scripture. Now, furthermore, if we take the more detailed and expounded look at what Irenaeus wrote, we will find that the Ebionites also, like say, rejected Paul, claiming that he was apostate from the law. To be consistent, we would also have to reject Paul. It wasn't just the other Gospels and the writings of Paul that the Ebionites rejected. According to Epiphanius, they also rejected certain prophets, including Isaiah. So I don't know if I need to add my slides again. I need to go through and see where there. So there. They acknowledge Abraham. Well, is this a? Yeah. There you go. They acknowledge Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Moses and Aaron, and Joshua the son of Nun, simply as Moses' successor, although he is of no importance. But after these, they acknowledge no more of the prophets, but even anathematize David and Solomon and make fun of them. So this is the Ebionites. This is what the Ebionites, they didn't even accept King David. Similarly, they disregard Isaiah and Jeremiah, Daniel and Ezekiel, Elijah and Elisha, for they pay them no heed and blaspheme their prophecies, but accept only the gospel. So we have the Ebionites who reject all of that. David, Samuel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, all of these are rejected by the Ebionites. You want to use the Ebionites as evidence for your belief? Do you follow the Ebionites with all of this, all the rejection of all of these prophets? I don't think so. I don't think you do. Even the Hebrew Israelites don't reject Daniel and Ezekiel and Isaiah. Isaiah is where we find this prophecy or not prophecy of the virgin birth, Isaiah 7:14. So maybe that's why they just get rid of the virgin birth completely. You don't even have to deal with it then. But Epiphanius also goes on and says, nor do they accept Moses' Pentateuch in its entirety. They reject certain sayings. When you say to them of eating meat, why did Abraham serve the angels the calf and the milk? Why did Noah eat meat? And why was he told to by God, who said, slay and eat? Why did Isaac and Jacob sacrifice to God? Moses too in the wilderness. He will disbelieve those things you will say. What need for me to read what is in the law when the gospel has come? The Ebionites didn't even go to the Old Testament. They didn't accept most of the Old Testament. So what are we doing? Are we accepting the Ebionites as truth, as fact, or are we accepting Scripture? Do we accept what Scripture says? Epiphanius continues on. This is because the Ebionites didn't eat meat. They were vegetarian. And in fact, actually, they argued that they argued that Jesus and John the Baptist were both vegetarian. They didn't eat meat. They were vegetarians. The Ebionites they didn't eat any meat at all. That he believed that Jesus was the perfect sacrifice and no more sacrifices were to be made. And so eating meat was mainly associated with sacrifice, and the Ebionites no longer sacrificed. They no longer required the eating of meat. They changed the scripture regarding John the Baptist having eaten locusts into eating some sort of honey cake. The Greek word for locust is akris, while the Greek word for cake is enkris. So they changed the word. We can see that in the Greek. It is subtle, but it is there. There's a change. And we must remember that many who use the Ebionites as evidence claim that their gospel was originally written in Hebrew, not Greek. But then Epiphanius does argue that that Jesus did actually eat fish in the gospel in Luke 24:42. Now, when rejecting parts of the Bible, it isn't long before the authority of more and more parts are brought into question. And that's where this kind of leads us into. When you start rejecting different parts of the Bible, you're leading yourself down into lines of, like, oh, well, I want to reject the virgin birth, so I need to reject the first two chapters of the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke. But then you have others that want to reject the Gospel of John. They want to reject Paul. Marcion, who rejected all of the Gospels apart from Luke, and then he redacted most of Luke as well. He rejected a lot of Paul, didn't use the Old Testament. So what we see is that the people who want to make these arguments, they need to reject the portions of the Bible that don't align with what they don't want to believe. They're not really making their case on the Bible. What they're doing there is they're arguing their belief, and then they're changing the scripture in order to, or rejecting particular scripture in order to make it fit their belief. And that's exactly what the Ebionites did, Marcion did, and what the Hebrew Israelites are doing as well. Now, some scholars believe that the Gospel of Matthew that the Ebionites used was actually different than the Gospel of the Ebionites, that there was a Gospel of the Ebionites and that there was also a Gospel of Matthew that they used, and they were two different books. The Gospel of Matthew being some kind of Hebrew version of the Gospel of Matthew, the Greek version, but theirs was Hebrew, and it was some kind of like version of that. And then they had a Gospel of the Ebionites as well. Not all scholars hold to that. Bart Ehrman talks about this in his Lost Gospels, that there was differences. He also believes that the Matthew was in Aramaic. I don't know if I want to bring up Bart, really. He says, we have evidence of yet another gospel authority used by some groups of, or all groups of the Ebionite Christians. The evidence comes to us from 4th century writings of Epiphanius. So he obviously points to Epiphanius. And he goes on, you can read this in his Lost Gospels on page 102, 103. And he claims that the Gospel of the Ebionites was actually written in Greek, whereas the Gospel of Matthew was actually written in Aramaic. What these, what really it kind of shows is that there's no consensus. There's differences. People make postulations of what there could have been, but we don't have the evidence, so we don't know. We really don't know. We have the writings of these other people, but they're only giving us certain portions of information. It's very limited to what we can know and what we can't know. All we can really say for certain is what these people wrote against them, and that's all that we know. Now, in Epiphanius says, now in what they call a gospel according to Matthew, though this is interesting. Now, in what they call the gospel according to Matthew, though it is not the entire gospel, but it is corrupt and mutilated, and they call this thing Hebrew. So they had the Gospel of Matthew in something that they called Hebrew, but Epiphanius is saying that it was corrupt. It wasn't the entirety. It's just in parts. But just because the Ebionites did not use the entire Gospel of Matthew does not mean that the parts that they didn't use were added at a later date. In fact, Epiphanius himself would seem to suggest that rather than material being added to the Gospel of Matthew, the Ebionites did not use the entirety of the gospel, which would actually kind of assert it was the opposite way round, that there was the Gospel of Matthew, but the Ebionites did not use it in full, just as they rejected certain parts of Moses or some of the prophets. So it wasn't that there wasn't the gospel, that the book of Isaiah wasn't about them. Of course it was, but they rejected it. It wasn't that there weren't certain parts of the writings of Moses. No, it existed. They just rejected it. And that seems to be what Epiphanius is saying about this Gospel of Matthew, is that it was there, but they rejected it. Now, Epiphanius continues on. Let me read this as well, saying 3 times a day God cursed the Nazarenes, for they harbor a further grudge against them. So they come from the Nazarenes, but they are not they're not following them anymore. And there's actually probably, it looks like that there's some kind of arguments and between them, because they, despite their Jewish origin, they preach that Jesus is the Christ, something that is opposite of what those who are still Jews and have not accepted Jesus. They have the gospel according to Matthew in its entirety in Hebrew, for it is clear that they still preserve this as it was originally written in the Hebrew alphabet. But I do not know whether they have also excised the genealogies from Abraham till Christ. So the Nazarenes had this gospel according to Matthew. Now, Epiphanius goes on, for by hearing that just Jesus' name and seeing the miracles performed by the hands of the apostles, they came to faith in Jesus themselves. And since they found that he had been conceived at Nazareth and brought up in Joseph's home, and for this reason is called Jesus the Nazarene in the gospel, as the apostles say, Jesus the Nazarene, a man approved by signs and wonders, and so on. They adopted this name, so to be called Nazarenes. So they were following what Jesus was called. And the Nazarenes, as we know, except they believed in the virgin birth. So while there's who would still claim that the chapters were added, the authenticity of the two chapters of the Gospel of Matthew are widely accepted by scholars as being authoritative. Is the vast majority of scholars would hold that the first 2 chapters of Luke and Matthew are authoritative. Now, while chapter 1 does contain the story of the angel's visit to Mary, it is in chapter 3 that the gospel where we find the genealogy is recorded by Luke. All right. And that's where, so even if you take out the first 2 chapters of the Gospel of Luke, right, and say those are not authoritative, even if you did that, you would still be left with Luke 3:23. And Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli. The genealogy is still in the Gospel of Luke, even if you take out that narrative about the virgin birth. Luke still says that Jesus was the supposed son of Joseph, not that he was the son of Joseph. Now, what we also should go into, for Epiphanius also says, for by supposedly using the same so-called gospel according to Matthew, Cerinthus and Carpocrates want to prove from the beginning of Matthew by the genealogy that Christ is the product of Joseph's seed and Mary. So Cerinthus, who we've already talked about, who the Ebionites are kind of linked to, well, they have the genealogy of Christ. The genealogy of Christ is found in the first chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. So you couldn't say that the first chapter of the Gospel of Matthew wasn't in existence if Cerinthus is using it. While he wanted to argue that Jesus was the product of Joseph's seed from the genealogy was very clearly there. It was in existence and being used. So we can't say that that this is a later addition. Cerinthus is using the Gospel of Matthew, the first chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. Now, Cerinthus believed that Jesus was not born of a virgin, but rather of Joseph's seed. And we find this in Irenaeus Against Heresies, Book 1, Chapter 26. And he says, Cerinthus, again, a man who was educated in wisdom of the Egyptians, taught that the world was not made by a primary God, but by a certain power far separated from him, and at a distance from the principality who is supreme over the universe, and ignorant of him who is above all. He represented Jesus as having not being born of a virgin, but as being the son of Joseph and Mary, according to the ordinary course of human generation. And he also says that Epiphanius also says that here, for by supposedly using the same so-called gospel according to Matthew, Cerinthus wants to prove the genealogy of Jesus, that he is of Joseph's seed and Mary. So Cerinthus very clearly had the chapter 1 of the Gospel of Matthew. Now, we've already seen that the Ebionites also believed this, right? That Joseph was the father. Thus, both sects of people shared the belief that Joseph was the biological father of Jesus. But the Cerinthians, however, believed that the Christ and Jesus were not the same being, but rather it was only at the baptism of Jesus that the Christ descends into Jesus in the dove. I'm not going to read all of this, but if you look at that 4 there, 14:4, it says, "This is because they maintain that Jesus is really a man, as I said, but that Christ, who descended in the form of a dove, has entered him, as we have found already in other sects, has been united with him. Christ himself is from God on high, but Jesus is the offspring of a man's seed and a woman. And that this Christ being comes and lives, this is New Age, this Christ thing comes in and lives in Jesus." And we also see that in the Panarion, he says, where does he say this? Oh no, that's Irenaeus. Irenaeus says that they have falsified genealogies. Or is that Epiphanius back there? Yeah. Anyway. In the writings of Irenaeus, he tells us that the Ebionites also believed that the Christ and Jesus were separate beings as well. You could see again in book 1:26, he says that they are, the Christ and Jesus are distinct and separate beings. Christ remained impassible insomuch as he was a spiritual being. Christ and the Jesus thing are two different, distinct beings. This is what Cerinthus believed. Epiphanius also tells us that this belief was shared by the Ebionites, they believed that the Christ, which was separate from Jesus, was created, and that actually Christ first lived in Adam. In that 32 there, it says that they say that Christ was created in heaven, also the Holy Spirit, but Christ lodged in Adam at first, and from time to time takes Adam himself off and puts him on again. For this is what they say he did at the time of the advent in the flesh. So the Ebionites also believed that Christ and Jesus are two different beings. Again, would the Hebrew Israelites argue that? Epiphanius indicates that the beliefs of the Ebionites changed over time, starting with the belief that Christ was the offspring of Joseph, but later changed to that Christ being distinct and separate from Jesus. And that's in Epiphanius book 1. Eusebius wrote a chapter on the Ebionites in his church history book 3, and he stated much of what Irenaeus and Epiphanius stated. I'll just quickly read a little bit about them. There were others, however, for they can. Point 2, for they considered him a plain and common man who was justified only because of his superior virtue, and he was the first. He was the fruit of intercourse of a man with Mary. In their opinion, the observance of the ceremonial law was altogether unnecessary. But then he also says there were others, however, besides them that were of the same name, but avoided the strange and absurd beliefs of the former, and they did not deny that the Lord was born of a virgin and of the Holy Spirit. So you see that there were differences even in their own sects. So what we see is the evidence that we have shows that the Ebionites, I'll come back on. So what we see is that there were sects that rejected the virgin birth. The Ebionites did reject the virgin birth, but there may be actually evidence that there are some Ebionites that didn't reject the virgin birth. Now, what we do know is that the Nazarenes did not reject the virgin birth. The Nazarenes were linked to the Ebionites. Ebionites come from the Nazarenes, but they had slightly different beliefs, and that Paul was a leader of the Nazarenes who believed in the virgin birth. So the claims of the Hebrew Israelites just don't hold up. They are assertions. They are relying on you not actually knowing this information. They are relying on you not knowing that there is no manuscript of the Gospel of the Ebionites. So yeah, that's over 2 hours. I didn't envisage going that long, but there's a lot of information there, and I understand that it's hard to follow in listening to 2 hours worth of discussion there. I am going to post a link if anybody would like to come up and discuss about it. I'm more than willing to discuss. If you would like to discuss about the virgin birth, no problem. It has to remain on topic. I will present. I appreciate that we haven't. I didn't even deal with the virgin birth specifically. Just really dealing with what the Hebrew Israelites claim about the virgin birth, and I just wanted to really show the arguments that they present about Zara, seed, the parenthesis in Luke, and the Ebionite argumentation. It's not there. It doesn't work. they are reliant on you not understanding and knowing this information. But yeah, I think after 2 hours that's enough. I'm not going to present any more. So if you would like to come up and discuss, then feel free to do so. If not, I shall finish. And say goodnight. So I'll give it a couple of minutes just to see if anybody would like to come up. The link is there if you would like to discuss anything on kind of the virgin birth, on anything that I presented tonight. That's the main thing. It's really on the presentation, which was solely focused on the Hebrew Israelite argumentations, not arguing for the virgin birth, didn't actually make an argument for the virgin birth. That wasn't the presentation. It's kind of not the point of what I presented tonight. It's just showing the Hebrew Israelite argumentations against the virgin birth, how they don't work, how they are manipulated, how they are assumptions, assertions, their claims that they are hoping that you don't know the answer to, or that you don't know the information. There are no manuscripts of this Hebrew gospel of the Ebionites. The claims that they make about Zara do not work. And what else did we look at? We looked at the manuscript that they love to use, which actually goes against them twice. So it is a one-off kind of manuscript that they like. But yeah, that's as far as I'm going to go. So I shall finish there. I will say thank you very much for being here. I do appreciate that this was kind of a little bit intense. It's a lot of really information that is presented from historical kind of evidence, just to show really against the arguments that they present. So I appreciate that it may have been a hard follow. Watch it again and go through. There was so much information that I wanted to get through, so it was hard to just stay and focus on one particular point for any length of time. So hopefully you did learn. Hopefully you did you followed and you were able to keep up with the information that was presented. So I will, whether you agree with me or you disagree with me on the presentation that I did, like I say, it wasn't an argument for or against the virgin birth in particular. It was just really an argument against the claims of the Hebrew Israelites. And that's all that I wanted to present for tonight. So yeah, I'm going to finish there. I am going to play. So I will say, I really do appreciate everybody that came here and has listened and has followed and has come back and gone and come back. I do appreciate everybody that listens. So I will address some of the comments. So it states there that okay, sorry, I'm not sure if that was aimed at me. Okay, so maybe it is. I'm wrong. I'm not sure what I'm wrong on, so maybe if you could let me know what I'm wrong on. All right, okay, aimed at Ivor 817. Okay, do apologize. Anyway, yeah, you're right. Part of the title is the virgin birth defended. It's more really, I suppose, the virgin birth defended against the Hebrew Israelites' claims, refuting the Hebrew Israelites' claims. So it is a defense of the virgin birth in the sense of it's showing the Hebrew Israelite claims to be false. It's not really making an argument itself. This video hasn't really been to present an argument for the virgin birth. It is defending the virgin birth against the false claims of the Hebrew Israelites. So specific on that. So I do understand that it does say that the virgin birth is defended. I trying to make it out more that it's the virgin birth defended against the false claims of the Hebrew Israelites. Now, I appreciate that there are other arguments about, Betula and Alma, and whether the prophecy actually is a prophecy about a future prophecy about the Messiah at all. I understand that. I haven't addressed that here. That wasn't the aim of the presentation tonight. It was solely on the Hebrew Israelites. I do have other videos where I have defended the usage or the virgin birth, where I've gone into Alma and Betula in that and argued for the virgin birth. Now, one thing I will say is that if you do believe in the New Testament, I think you have to really, really, whether the prophecy of Isaiah 7:14 was the Messiah or not is another thing. The New Testament most certainly does argue that Jesus is the fulfillment of Isaiah 7:14, and it was a virgin. It is very clear that Matthew 1 and Luke 1-3 is arguing for a virgin birth. I think that Paul argues for a virgin birth on a couple of occasions, specifically in Galatians 4:4. But yeah, I think that, like I say, it was specific that I haven't addressed those particular points. I have done that elsewhere in other videos, and I didn't want to just go over the same thing. I just wanted to address those points. But yeah, you have to, you first have to get it that the woman in Isaiah 7:14 was not a virgin. Yeah. Well, I suppose the woman in Isaiah 7:14, if you're referring to the woman there that kind of gets alluded to in chapter 8, that woman is not a virgin because she's already had a son. So it clearly isn't a virgin, and not in reference to Isaiah 8:8. The prophetess is certainly not a virgin there. But yeah, I'm going to finish there. I'm going to play a song. I'm going to play us a song out. It is one of my songs that I produced. Now, all these songs are available on my YouTube, so you can go and have a listen to them. If you like them, you do. If you don't, you don't. It's they're there for people to listen to if you would like to. If not, don't worry about it. It's fine. No, the Hebrew term for virgin is not used in Isaiah 7:14. You're right. It's Alma, not Betula. But the difference between a Betula and an Alma is that a Betula can be a virgin at any age, and Alma can only be a young woman of marriageable age. That is the Alma. And by definition, in Jewish context or definition, she would also be a Betula. But the difference between Betula and Alma is that Betula gives us the sexual status of the woman, does not give us any kind of indication of what age she would be. So you can be a Betula at 100, That's only referencing the sexual status. Alma gives us both the sexual status and the age. She would be a young, unmarried woman, and by Jewish definition would just be a betula on that basis. So women who are alma, in the biblical sense, they are also betula. But betula doesn't give us the information that alma can give us. Alma gives us more information because it gives us the fact that she is unmarried, that she's not being married, she is of marriageable age, and she is not an older woman. So she's younger. So Alma, I think there's a reason why Alma is used there. So the first time that we see Alma being used is of Rebecca, and Rebecca is a young unmarried woman who's never been married, who is of marriageable age, who is a betula. So the Alma is a betula, but a betula does not necessitate that they're going to be an Alma, but Alma does mean that she's a betula. So the usage there of Alma shows that she's going to be young. It's LJ, not LG. I know that you like to call me LG, but it's not. I guess I'm a TV or something like that. It can be understood as a virgin prior to Isaiah taking her. Too much focus on the virginity and not the entire chapter. So of course, I understand. But she wasn't a virgin because she had already given birth. She had already had children. So, yeah. It's all right. I get called a lot of different things. LG, LJ. It's fine. I understand what you're saying. I haven't been called LG for a long time, actually. Somebody else used to call me that, but I won't bring that up. Show me where anyone called Jesus Emmanuel. Well, Emmanuel just means God with us. Yeah, and she wasn't. The woman in Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 8 is not a virgin. So she's not the Alma. She's not the Alma which is in reference. It is a future prophecy given to the house of David. And yeah, that's actually that's actually something different. That prophecy there. Yeah, Nicodemus calls Jesus Emmanuel, God with us, or God is with you. Anyway, I do appreciate all the people that have been here, agree or disagree. The information is only for you to look into, to study. The information is presented, because I haven't really presented the argument for the virgin birth. My study into the virgin birth is available on YouTube if you want to go back and look at that. I have updated my writings on it recently, but my study, I did do a detailed study on the virgin birth back in I'd say about 3 years ago, and it is available on here, and you can go in and have a look at that, because that does specifically deal with Isaiah 7:14, Isaiah 8, Matthew, and that. Yeah. So, well, actually, Matthew very clearly does say that Jesus is the fulfillment of the virgin birth. The Greek there is Parthenos. The Greek of the Septuagint is Parthenos. It is very clear that Matthew is quoting Isaiah 7:14. So whether Matthew is right or wrong, he is definitely alluding to the virgin birth back in Isaiah 7:14. So you'd have to say that Matthew was wrong. There is a sense to that. God was with the house of David. That is the point of Isaiah 7:14. It has to be a future prophecy. It is a prophecy. It is something. These two kings are coming against Israel, or the northern, the southern tribes of Israel. The two kings are coming to destroy them, and the only way that this future Messiah is going to come is if God, although they're going to be unprotected in the sense that because of Ahaz's rejection of God, that the kings are going to come against them. The prophecy is that they won't be totally destroyed. They won't be destroyed because this future prophecy is going to happen. And so it stops it is a promise to the house of David, not to Ahaz. Isaiah turns away from Ahaz. He says, you reject it. So he then turns to the house of David and makes this prophecy to the house of David. It wasn't to Ahaz. Ahaz rejected it. It was a promise to the house of David that they would be protected. Anyway, yeah, I'm not sure really what you're pointing at, that Judah and Israel at that time didn't have two kings of Judah. Yeah, I don't really understand the point of that. I didn't claim that Judah had two kings. Talking about the kings that were coming against them. So, anyway. Zara does not mean the seed of a man. It can, in context, as I pointed out in Leviticus, there are times when Zara can mean that, but it actually just doesn't mean the sperm of a man in the vast majority of times. And it always, when it is used with that, it is used in copulation. What it means is offspring. It means the offspring of a person. The offspring of Eve, the seed of Eve, is an offspring of seed. It does not mean the sperm of Eve. It's just a nonsensical argument that the word Zara means sperm. It does not mean sperm. It can, in context, with the clarification of what is being said. But yeah. Anyway, I've been going 2.5 hours, so I will finish there. And I will say thank you very much for your engagement here. Whether you agree, disagree, I do appreciate it. It is important that people come here and agree and disagree. I'm more than happy for that. It's okay. But hopefully people have learned something against the Hebrew Israelite argumentation tonight. So that if people have heard the argumentation against the Hebrew Israelites, we know that the heritage normally comes through the man, according to the Tanakh. There are places in the Old Testament where it doesn't, where we can see the kingly line going through a woman because we see somebody doesn't have a male son, and so we this is Second Chronicles. We see this, but yeah, Joshua the son of Nun, by the way. Yeah, okay. Second Chronicles. If you go and read that, you'll see the the man's daughter is classified as a ben. So, yeah. Okay. I appreciate everybody. Thank you very much for being here, and I shall play us out.
Born in the stillness of the night, a star declared his holy light. The King of Israel, heaven's plan, Messiah come, the Son of Man. Every word he spoke, the Father's breath. Each step he walked, a path to death. Born to be king, to wear the crown, to lay his life and lay it down. The blood that flows, the grace it brings, through Jesus Christ, the world redeemed. Obedient even to the tree, he bore the cross for you, for me. The Father's will, the Son obeyed. Through sacrifice, the debt was paid. The veil was torn, the curse undone. The Gentiles called, his work begun. Born to be king, to wear the crown, to lay his life and lay it down. The blood that flows, the grace it brings, through Jesus Christ, the world redeemed. Born to be king, to wear the crown.